Welcome to the SNF Spotlight series, your one-stop shop to find out what's really going on in SNFs nationwide. I'm your host, Reuben, and this is sponsored by Renewal Rehab, the best therapy provider for SNFs nationwide. Okay, welcome to the SNF Spotlight series. Today we are hosting our very first panel with the team from Mozart Healthcare. Mozart Healthcare is a national real estate management firm focused on senior living. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Archie, I'm going to start with you. Can you give me a little bit background about your management consulting experience?
Yeah, sure. So I was a CFO for a national chain, and I wanted to try something different. I had my accounting background, and I started really in the industry back in 08, 09 when things were really tanking across the whole country. And I was exposed to a broad array of industries when I was in public accounting, and I sort of missed that a little bit. So when I went off on my own, after being in healthcare in 2015, I said, I want to focus on really improving the bottom lines, but as a consultant. And it was not really something that had been done in the industry, and I said, let me try it out. I started in October. By January, I was servicing around 60 nursing homes in 8 states. And what I saw was the biggest learning experience of my life in those 3 months. A, I didn't sleep, but B, is I was really exposed to some phenomenal operators and some who were not so phenomenal, but saw things that didn't really make sense. And I managed to take an incredible amount of notes and trying understanding what were best practices. And even within some of the great operators, in certain states they were being really successful, in other states they were struggling, and they couldn't explain why, because they knew they were doing the exact same thing in each state. So what I ended up perfecting to a degree for each of them in their respective things was trying to hone in on what their struggle was. And we all have this every so often, this tunnel vision, and they just missed it. It was right in front of them most of the time. So like any management consultant, you're only as good as the results that you bring, and I was tasked with bringing in some serious results and turning around their bottom line. So I learned quite a bit. Just for one example I can give you, there was a company that was running incredibly high occupancy, upper 90s in the East Coast, but they were losing a decent sized money per quarter. We did a 200% swing by the following quarter after we started. And what we realized in that specific company is while they had all the revenue they could possibly hope for, they were looking at certain expense line items, but others were just going right over their head. And the example of that in one specific state, it was non-unionized, which was, for me, they just felt like they were in safe territory because of that. Their rates were going to be where they were supposed to be. They were running high 20s overtime, and they had no clue about it. And what I immediately identified is the overtime wasn't because they didn't have the appropriate staffing. It was literally a misuse of technology. Employees had figured out how to maximize their paycheck without it really raising red flags. And we employed technology, and it literally cut off that problem overnight. They went from 22% to below 10% within a week of us implementing that solution. So that was an easy solution, and unfortunately most of the fixes aren't that easy. But a lot of what goes on in our industry is we're dealing with regulation, we're dealing with labor, we're dealing with a myriad of challenges, and we become so focused, or better word, we become so hyper-focused on areas we think are the problem when sometimes it's something completely different. It's not unique to our industry. So that's sort of what brought me to it, and it gave me the idea that if I could always somehow be 10,000 feet away from what's going on so I could have that perspective, but then immediately be able to zoom in when it was appropriate, it could really create a dynamic company. And that was sort of my long-term goal, but I wanted to do the management consulting gig to really both be exposed to as many states as possible and as many different operators to really try and learn best practices, learn what was going well, and then even within organizations that were doing really great jobs, why was one state going well and why not another? And that sort of helped me devise sort of the strategy for when we launched Mozart and where we are today.
Reuben Stein, you are also in Mozart Healthcare. What's your title and what's your role? Where do you come in on this?
I am the Director of Underwriting and Acquisitions. My background is primarily in commercial real estate. A lot of what I have done in the commercial real estate world is dealing with complex problems, specifically with large Class A office buildings and retail centers. Also a little bit industrial here and there, but primarily office is where I've focused my time over the past many years. And I've seen a lot of synergy between commercial real estate and the skilled nursing world, in that everything comes down to strong management, meaning focusing on fundamentals while also being able to create a quality of, in this scenario, care. In the commercial real estate world, it would be a quality of life for the people who are living in the office spaces, and doing so in a way where it maximizes revenue, cuts expenses, but doesn't cut the quality. And everything is about relationships. So that is why I think that going into the skilled nursing or any healthcare industry business is an easy switch, because everything's about relationships, everything's about the people. As long as you have good people around you and people that know the right questions to ask, people that know what to look for based on the experience, between us, I think we have close to 60 years of experience in the industry, if not more. Having that experience behind us, jumping in from day one, it's not a startup, right? We're coming in with decades of experience to know how to cut costs and how to increase revenue on a case-by-case basis. So I think that's sort of my background in what I've been doing in the commercial real estate world. Is I've been dealing in a lot of different states. I've been dealing in a lot of local governments, a lot of regulations just in the commercial real estate world. So jumping into the healthcare industry is not a big stretch.
So Nathan, I know your family, the past history, has a deep sense in the nursing home space. Tell me a little bit about what you do with the Mozart team.
As you mentioned, my background is in the nursing home business. I was basically brought up in it, and something that I moved back to Chicago about 16, 17 years ago and jumped in as an administrator, baptism by fire, as they say. I was thrown into it, but not really thrown into it because I did grow up with it. I experienced it on many different levels, from the front line all the way up to expanding the family business over the years, acquisitions, sales, and really got to see the different sides of things. But I think the most important thing that I bring to Mozart is being able to say I've sat on the other side of the desk. I've sat in the operator's chair. And being able to sit in the operator's chair allows me to see it from their eyes, know what they're going through, be compassionate not only to them, but compassionate to the compassion that they have to show to the residents, to the staff, and things like that. I can talk the talk with them very comfortably. And joining a team with Reuben and Archie and growing Mozart Healthcare with that mindset, I believe we bring a tremendous asset to the world that wants to get in to the skilled nursing world. That, together with my relationships that I'm very thankful and very lucky to have built over the years, I'm hoping that we can bring both those, or all three of those points, to grow something into something special.
So Archie, when was Mozart founded and why?
It didn't have an intentional thought, to be quite honest, when it was formed. I had just launched my management company. We had built a team to focus on helping operators across the country sort of transform what was going on. And what I found with some of my clients at the time is they owned many of the homes that they were operating, both assisted living, skilled nursing, independent living. And there were a myriad of homes that were usually the homes that they got started off with, that they were leasing from, in some cases, REITs, publicly traded real estate investment trusts. In some cases, it was private real estate professionals. And their attitude to those properties were quite different. And I started to, dig into it. There would literally be a couple homes that were within the same geographic region, even sometimes within a 20, 30-minute drive of each other, and one home was performing phenomenally well and the other one was just getting by. And I had to sit down with one of the owners and I said, what's going on here? I see when you talk, you never even bring up that facility, what's going on? I remember the conversation led to basically saying I'm never going to own that. We've tried having conversations with our landlord multiple times about having a purchase option, and we were basically told it's not on the table. So why would I continue putting my efforts in something that I'm never going to have the benefit of, when I could focus on something that I know that will have a long-term success for myself and my team? And since I know the keys will ultimately going back to the landlord, it was a whole different mindset change. That sort of just, it started a flame, okay? And at the time, my brother and I were talking about doing something together, and it sort of became a deal. We did one deal that wasn't part of Mozart, that was in early 2016. It was just an investment. And when we started seeing, and I started seeing specifically what was going on, I'm like, we can do something different. And it sort of got me really excited. And then we sort of decided in around July of 2016 is let's do something. And then we went and we found a deal in Texas. We actually formed an operations group. We found a really, really qualified regional director of operations. We found a guy who was a great CFO. They knew each other from their past lives, but they sort of joined forces, and we launched them as a company. We took nothing of their operations. We didn't have an ounce in ownership, but we created this as a collaborative partnership. A partnership where we wanted them to be successful beyond their wildest dreams, and we knew that if that happened, ultimately we would be successful. So their win is our win. We started that, we closed in December of 2016. That was our first deal. From December of 2016 to December of 2018, fast forward 2 years, we closed on 35 skilled nursing facilities and 1 independent living facility. That specific operator went from nothing to today they're operating 12 buildings and they're doing extremely well. The quality of care they're producing is just really in their regions, they've become the preeminent operator, and it's exactly what we set out to do. And we've done this with a couple other groups since. It's really been relationships that are based upon common understanding that we're just not a landlord. We're here to be a partner and help you succeed. And in almost every single instance, it's been that collaborative feel. We've run into some challenges where it started off that way and then ultimately they didn't want the landlord involved, okay? And they're like, get out. And we're able to understand that in certain instances, we should be out, but we want to be here to support them. And however we can support it the best, it's not meant to be an overarching relationship. It's not meant to be an overbearing relationship. It's probably a better word.
I like overarching.
Yeah, exactly. I was just...
Freudian slip.
Exactly. But it's not meant to be an overbearing relationship. It's meant to be one where they come to us and say, you know, in today's world, everyone is hiring back offices and their management fee is growing and growing because the amount that it takes to support a healthcare operation is getting more difficult by the day. You know, before we had PDPM, we were rugs, and before that, there were so many changes. Even in, when I've been solely focused on skilled nursing, it's been over 10 years now. The amount of changes that have happened, I can't even document, right? And people keep hiring, but we don't have more revenue to support that. So when our operators and our partners look at it, it's like, wait a second, we have a free back office supporting us in the form of our landlords who are here to help us with whether it's creating new programming, whether it's creating new initiatives, whether it's helping us with building our financial team. So when they look at it as like a free resource, that's exactly how we want it to be. We want it to be viewed as our return on investment is you guys succeeding, because then our asset ultimately grows in value, and you're also a win for that because ultimately that asset's going to be yours. So it sort of just happened, and then it got really exciting.
It's sharing best practices. It's best practices by seeing other things and seeing what worked by other people and being able to share that, like Archie said. People sometimes need a Mozart in order to take that leap. We help them take that first leap, and hopefully by taking that first leap and finding the right fit for them will allow them to grow. And like Archie's saying, their success is our success. Sometimes back in the day, I remember it was, and Archie, you might remember this, is like people would say, first deal, you gotta eat crow on your first deal. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist anymore, and Archie can correct me if I'm wrong, but we want to change that a little bit. It doesn't have to be complete. It might be a tougher deal. You might have to roll your sleeves a little bit more for that first one, but we'll help you. We want you to be successful, and hopefully your second and your third and your fourth is going to get easier, and you're going to be able to scale up properly without compromising care, without compromising employee morale, without compromising the families and everybody else that touches the service industry that we're in. Ultimately, this is a service industry that we got to remember what we're doing here. We're providing a home, a roof over the head for residents, and a place for people to come to work and earn a living. It's a fine mix, which we want to be able to provide.
We've had that exact instance. We don't try and make them eat crow in their first deals, and that is what happens in majority of relationships out there. That being said, people do feel tight because it's the first time they're taking that leap. In a lot of cases, we're their first deal, right? So they're scared. This is their first time they're taking this biggest risk of going off on their own. So in that regard, I wouldn't call it crow. I'd call it's apprehension, it's fear. So we try and calm them down, but we've had people who no longer needed us. They could have done the deals on their own, but they've come back to us and asked us to be their landlord on those deals because they know that we're going to give them that purchase option, but they know that we're going to be there to help them through it. So sometimes you're willing to give up a little to know that you've got that partner in your corner to really help you get through that next growth phase, right? If you're, 1 to 5 buildings is one way to operate your business. From 5 to 10 is a different way. And once you start going into multiple states or even growing above 10, you have to constantly change that mindset. And the advantage of what Mozart brings is what Nathan just said is best practices is both in my management consulting before I had Mozart, I saw so much what was going on. And I literally would call my tenants and say, hey, I know you're paying X, Y, and Z, or I know you got this in relationship. I've got this guy or I've got this gal and they've done phenomenal work in this state or that state or in your direct state. And I've had my operators call me up and they're saying, you have no idea how much money you just saved me, or you have no idea how much that improved what was going on. Thank you so much. And I don't get more rent because I do that. I don't get any more, but ultimately, yes, I am improving the bottom line of the asset. It's not about that. My call isn't about how can I improve the asset's value. It's about, I want them to be so happy and successful that they're able to focus on it. So it's really trying to build that relationship where they want to come back to us and where they want us to be a partner with them.
So Reuben, you guys are more than just a general landlord. You guys are taking this asset, helping them grow.
I think that anybody can buy a deal, right? Anybody could go after a nursing home. They can go to somebody who has been wanting to invest in nursing homes for a long time and raise the money relatively quickly. How that deal operates and how the success of that deal will depend mostly on the people that are on boots on the ground operations. The support that they get from their landlords is typically exactly like what Nasal and Archie said, is typically hands off and pay me my rent and see you later. You can't pay, I'll find somebody else, because there's a dozen people looking for homes and for every dozen there's another dozen. And it's easy, right? But with that comes is that home gonna still be around and be operating in a few years from now, right? That's the real question. So anybody can go out and do it. Anybody can raise the money and buy a home and make a quick fee. But the stability and what you're building a company on, right? You're building it on one column as opposed to multiple. So if a few fall, then you're still standing. I think that what we can bring to an operator, especially somebody who is a hustler, somebody who wants to get it done, is give them that certainty of support. And we will do that for every person that comes into our operations and all of the staff, and they will know that if there's a question, if there's something that we can be doing better, we will do it for them. We may propose it, they may propose it, but it's something that we're going to be open to. That is what being a boutique corporate company gives us the flexibility to do.
So you guys, Nathan, you guys are typically, when you're looking at a deal, are you purchasing it solely on its own, or do you already have that operator in the back of your mind?
In a perfect world, you want to have the operator before the deal. Because sometimes if you go the other way and you start forcing the operator into a deal that you happen to have, you might be forcing a square into a circle. Whereas if you have an operator that already has been operating for someone, a regional operations person who's really grown in a certain state, in a certain region, and they're itching or they're chomping at the bit to maybe make an offer on some of those buildings that they've overseen, or maybe something that they know, and they come to say, I really think I can do wonders with this building. It's suffering. I know the owner, he's an old guy, or they're ready to, but they just don't have the wherewithal to structure it, to make it happen. That's where we would be a perfect fit. It doesn't always work that way. I think there's nothing typical about this business. You said, what's typical? I don't think there's anything typical, but ideally, that's where you want to be, because that's finding someone who's already comfortable there. You could also find a guy who's never even touched a state, but he or she is ready to make the jump and ready to make a move. And you tell them, okay, so go do your homework, go tell us what you're looking for, and that's where we can come in. Like I said, I'm very thankful to have been to my father, to my family. I've been brought up in this, that it's years of a Rolodex, for those who know what a Rolodex is, but it's years of creating a Rolodex in this industry to be able to find the right fit. It's not an exact science, and it doesn't have to be that way.
I would say that 75% of the letters of intent that Mozart has ever written has had an operator usually listed in the LOI or identified beforehand. When we've gone to target deals, we've targeted them based on knowing that we know that either person A or person B is ideal for that specific deal. And therefore we can either stretch ourselves on that deal, or they have synergies in that deal that give us an upside. Okay, they know some of the players in those buildings already. And I'm thinking the last few deals we did, and that's exactly how it went down, is we had an operator who came to us and said, hey, we'd like to grow. We are willing to grow in these 6 or 7 markets. And then we call and say, we don't have in 6 or 7 markets, but we've got one very close to him. I actually know that guy. He used to work for me. He moved. And then I'm just thinking of one deal right now. And then they stepped into that building. They knew the building. They knew the administrator. So it was like a shoo-in. And because they knew to a degree, I wouldn't call it skeletons of the closet, but they knew the skeletons of the closet of that deal and of the people who were there, they were able to hit the ground running on day one. So when you're just buying blindly and you're acting as matchmaker and buying a deal and finding a person, many times that works, okay? But it's a little bit of a harder barrier to get over. So we prefer the other way. And like I said, we've done 25% that haven't been that way, but that's, by and large, that's how we've tackled our deals.
What would you say were some of the most challenging issues that you guys are facing in the industry currently?
The capital markets have changed quite a bit because of COVID. I mean, you could really see who your partners were when COVID launched. In most instances, it had nothing to do with their ability to make a decision, right? So I could think of one instance where I had a tenant whose bank literally just shut off the spigot overnight. Tenant was doing really well, okay? And this example, I'm telling you, tenant, the same issues existed to the landlord. And the banker, we got on the phone with the banker. The banker's like, I'm so sorry. This has nothing to do with me. I run healthcare. Corporate made a decision because of COVID. We're stopping everything overnight. We're not doing renewals, and it didn't make any sense. And a month later, they apologized and did it because people felt like the world was falling apart. So the capital markets have opened up quite a bit. Where rates are right now is still competitive, but you have a lot more to prove right now with COVID. With occupancy going down dramatically as a result of COVID, people still being scared about this method of care, there's a lot more to prove. But bankers are back open for business. I think where we stand right now is we're going to see an incredible amount of inventory coming to the market, but your ability to take the appropriate amount of risk, but realizing that the industry will never be the same as it was 12 months ago. So when you ask what's the single biggest risk factor, is that what we were doing 12 months ago for the last however many years doesn't exist today. You have to really make serious investments in infection control, because while it may not come back, and God willing, COVID is gone for good, okay? And people get fully vaccinated in a year, we're beyond this. The expectation of people being in their own private rooms, the expectation of how you structure and build your facilities and renovate the facilities is different from what it was a year ago. From a year ago, you could still get away with things because that's how it's been done. That's how it's been done. Dirty word in every business has become particularly dirty now with COVID in the air.
I think regulatory-wise also. Everybody's been stepping on each other's. You have people from all different levels, the state level, the local level, the city level, then the CMS and government, and everybody's like shouting and rules and regulations, and it's like there's been a lot of pivoting going on the operations level, and that trickles up to the real estate side of things, because the bankers that are backing these deals are looking to us and saying, okay, they're just hearing things. They're hearing, well, what about this new rule and that new rule and this new rule? So we got to having the experience on the operation side to be able to talk it up to the bankers. I think that allows us to sift through the deals that are going to come to market like ours. There's going to be a lot of deal flow, but knowing how to differentiate between, I don't want to say what's real and what's not real. It's all real, but what's important and what's not important, and what takes priority. The regulatory has just gone crazy, and everybody's stepping on each other's toes, almost down to like the neighborhood watch level. It's like, so you got to really know how to appease everybody, make everybody happy, but also you got to answer to everybody.
It wasn't that long ago that you had no idea if a skilled nursing facility was going to become a special focus candidate. Special focus candidates are the ones that CMS is hovering over. You have twice a year surveys versus once a year surveys. It's a home that's on a special focus list is at the risk of being shut down. I've had it before where I bought a home and 3 weeks later we were put onto the special focus list. And anyone who understands how that process works knows that it had nothing to do with me. It's a 3-year look back. We would have no clue. Today, there's transparency. And that's great for a buyer. When about a year ago, there was Senate investigations, and now CMS releases their list so you know who's a candidate to be on that list. So you have transparency. But on the flip side, it's some interesting data. If anyone is ever bored, and no one ever said that I wasn't a geek, but I'm a little bit of a data geek. And you can go onto the CMS data sets and look, you count the amount of tags that have been given in the last 12 months compared to any 12-month period in the last little while. It's shocking. And not just the amount of tags, but the level of tags. They're being handed out almost like candy. And it's not fair to our industry, but when you talk about challenges, when you're assessing the risk of a building, the clinical risk, the compliance risk, you have to read a whole new world, right? So when something used to cost you $2 before and someone tells you it's costing you $4 right now, you're like, that's crazy. But when you find out that everyone's paying $4, that's not so crazy anymore. So when you used to look at buildings and say, wait a second, they got 12 tags in the last survey, or 15 tags, or 20 tags, you used to look at that and say, this is a really serious concern for us to assess. I'm not saying it's not a concern anymore, it very much is. But you have to realize when the numbers have gone up so exponentially in specific markets, I'm not talking about nationally, but I know in Texas the numbers have gone up dramatically. In many of the states that we're in, the numbers are just, it's pretty crazy. So when you look at those, even in Michigan, the number of IJs and G tags that have been given in Michigan this year are just, it's unheard of. So when you're starting to say, wait a second, this building that I'm looking at got a G tag last year or an IJ tag last year, you're saying, I don't want to touch that right now. You have to be willing to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean that this building is a horrific building. It means it could have been a bad day. It means it could have been a surveyor who, was just scared about COVID. It doesn't mean that the building didn't do anything wrong. But we're in a market that we're so regulated, and every single sneeze we take, there's someone standing by us with a tissue for our nose before we even have a chance to catch it ourselves. Every human being who will be under that kind of watch is going to make mistakes. And we have to be a little more human about how we tackle that. So we have to deal with the same way with our partners. So when our partners get those types of tags, we're not coming down saying, what'd you do, right? It's, how can we help? How can we be supportive? So it's an entirely different industry than it was 12 months ago.
Yeah. Along with the regulatory and the compliance and the capital markets challenges, you have the regular COVID challenges that are not over yet, right? Staffing industry, which people are having trouble finding proper staffing numbers. Food costs have gone up. Now, will they go down? Will it be easier to find people? Yes, it will, eventually. But no one knows when that is. So what are you going to do in the meantime to make sure that everyone's getting the proper amount of care, proper quality of care, I should say, and balancing the fact that staffing costs have jumped up exponentially? That's a very difficult thing to answer. I don't know if I could answer that on a general basis. It'd have to be on a case by case, but I think that those COVID challenges are probably not going to be over for, I don't know, there's maybe a couple of years. That's another significant challenge since it's such a expensive line item.
How do you guys decide what you're going to do and what should you expect in the future?
When COVID hit, we had just been in the process, really December of 2019. Mozart had taken a year off of acquisitions, and we did a pretty big acquisition at the end of 2018. We had launched our sister company at the same time, Paradigm Healthcare. We made a decision we're going to take a year to process things, which is unique for our industry because people are just constantly in growth mode and just hungry. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing was doing it right. And we had made a decision that it seemed like things were going in the right direction. And the example I gave you is we closed, and a few days later we were put in special focus. We had cleared that building in a pretty rapid process. So we had made the decision that we wanted to start growing. And then COVID hit. And it was sort of like stop you in your tracks. But as we started getting to a healthier place towards the summer of last year, I started approaching Reuben and Nathan to try and form something different than what Mozart was before. I'm incredibly proud of what Mozart had built over the first 2 years. I wanted to double down on it, but I wanted to do it in a way that gave us a little bit broader reach. And it couldn't just be all in my hands anymore. Or with the team that we had at the corporate office, we needed to bring some bigger guns to the table to allow us to tackle more. And what prompted that feeling was sort of seeing what had happened with COVID and how we needed some different perspectives. Starting to have a conversation with Reuben was refreshing, not just because he's a great person to talk to, but because he has zero preconceived notions about what we're walking into. So when you ask about how are we planning on tackling it, we're planning on tackling it by not doing it the same way as everyone else. Okay? We're going to try and do things a little bit differently. So bring in some fresh perspectives, coming in from both the commercial and retail space, seeing how the capital markets function in that, which is entirely different than in our case, both the debt and equity side, understanding the stresses of tenants of his in office spaces no longer having anyone coming to work but still having to pay a massive nut as far as their lease payment. That same challenge exists when you lose 20% of your census, right? And you don't have that revenue anymore. So what we're looking to do is really try and build an assembly line that allows us to process deals in a little bit more collaborative fashion. So, Nathan's going to have his markets that he's going to focus on. Reuben's going to be both internal, external. So he's going to be playing sort of this dual role, but he's really going to be the one looking at it from that outsider's perspective. Okay, because Nathan and I, as much as I keep saying I don't have tunnel vision because I've seen so much, I'm not a fool. I have tunnel vision, right? Because this is what I've dedicated myself doing over the last years since I closed down the consulting company. When I took this on full time, you start becoming prone to the same things you were telling everyone else that they were doing. So having Reuben assessing the deals from an underwriting perspective as a director of underwriting, but also focusing on acquisitions, wearing that dual title, is going to give us the ability to tackle things pretty rapidly. So we've got a decent sized team for what we're trying to do, but with a new perspective. And that's where Reuben comes in. And Nathan being, in the markets that he's tackling and with the relationships he's built, both on the operation side, but Nathan also is a principal at a pretty respectable insurance company in our industry that focuses heavily on healthcare, is seeing the underlying operations. As an insurance, you get their financial statements, you get all their CMS surveys, you get, whether it's their diet, you get everything. So he's also, besides what we've got at Mozart and our operators, because while we have our buildings today, we get financial statements for our operators for every building they have when we do their global cash flow. So we're looking at probably, if I had to guess, 90 to 100 financial statements a year. And then what Nathan sees, having that broad range of exposure, okay, but also having that broad Rolodex that it has will allow us to not start up, as they said right now, because we're not a startup, but allow us to hit the ground running. We're very excited about the upcoming, ECAP conference. The world is starting to get back into, normal, and we expect that at the end of, Q3 and beginning of Q4, there will be a decent amount of inventory as some of the operators who are just worn out from the last 2 years of regulatory changes, oversight changes, compliance, saying, I just don't think I'm built for this anymore. And we want to be there to help them transition those properties to operators who are excited for this challenge and who are looking forward to this.
We each bring something to the table. We should not be stepping on each other's toes. We should be able to bounce things off of each other, move quickly, execute quickly, know when it's a good thing, know when it's a bad thing, when do we got to move on, when is this something we want to spend some more time on, and we can delegate to each other. Okay, that's your strength, that's my strength. So there's a lot of that synergy amongst us. Anybody I've mentioned this idea to, including, one of the founders of Mozart, his brother, who I'm very close with, he's like, it's perfect.
We all literally have different areas of focus, but Reuben's dangerous enough in all of them. So as that guy who's walking in both my world and Nathan's world on a daily basis, he'll keep us fresh on our toes.
Yeah, this sounds exciting. Yeah, go ahead. Reuben.
No, I was just going to say, I one of the things I like to do is ask questions, hopefully not annoyingly so. I think that's exactly why brokers and sellers are going to give us deals. Because we know what we're doing, we know what questions to ask, and we're going to do it quickly. And people looking for a quick deal that want to keep it relatively quiet and want certainty of closure, they're going to come to us because of that. We're not going to say, oh, we'll put it under contract, we'll do this, we'll do that, and then just fly by the seat of our pants. We're going to actually study it. We're going to do it quickly, and we're going to get back to them with a realistic answer. And if we can't figure out how to make it work, then I'm sure someone else will buy it, and we'll be asking the question, how are they making it work, a year from now? And hopefully they do. But generally, we're going to go through everything, especially with the operators who are underwriting the deal, also with us, and really get down to the granular aspects of the deal and understand it.
So what kinds of questions do you ask?
We would first probably look into the local standards, right? What are the local standards? And, I guess we'd start locally and then sort of expand, maybe go the other way around. I'm not sure what makes the most sense. But we would look at the rates, right? Medicaid rates in every place. There are local expenses, right? We talked about staffing before. Food is another one. In certain areas, especially if we have scale there, right? If we have other buildings there, maybe we can bring the cost down a little bit cheaper, right? So we already own in Texas quite a bit. If we buy a home right next to one of our existing homes, obviously the cost for that new home is going to be a little bit less than it would be if it was in Louisville, Kentucky. So, those types of things are going to be on a case-by-case basis. Not everything is going to be general here. And that if it was so general, I think it would be a lot easier for more people to be successful. Bringing these operators under our standard, right? They're going to be under the Mozart standard. and that standard is going to be known throughout the industry, as it already is, because Archie has sort of defined that reputation of the company to be sort of impeccable and unimpeachable. And the operators are going to want
Exemplary, I think.
Exemplary. Operators are going to want to come to us. Operators are going to want to come to us because they're not going to get that support or education anywhere else. They're going to be sort of thrown into the weeds and fend for yourselves. And you don't want it, we'll find another operator. That's not how it's going to be. We want to make sure that everyone's going to be comfortable, everyone's going to be happy, and create an environment that sustains for a long time.
Mozart's goal is not to be the biggest in the industry, not even in the top 5, 10. Okay, that's never my goal, never has my goal, and it will never be my goal. The goal of Mozart, and the reason why we called it Mozart Healthcare, is not because of the musician. I grew up in Mozart Street here in Chicago, and when we started it, we wanted to remind ourselves in the name every single day, this should be a family-friendly company, and there should be accessibility. Real estate players out there who are 10x of our size, who also have operations groups that they own and operate, and do some really great work. And this isn't to diminish or to try and compete with them. What we're trying to do is be more on the grounds to be collaborative partners with our operators in real time, understand in real time. And for some operators, the right approach is to go with someone who's just bigger, and we'll work with them on structuring a healthy lease, and they can do their thing, But we're really looking to create synergies amongst our operators and amongst ourselves. And by doing that differently, we're not only not competing with the other players out there doing it. I think we can leverage off of each other, where they would want to tackle a deal that's more up their alley, and we won't. And we've done deals like that in Mozart, where there's a deal that just didn't make sense for us, didn't fit into, I wouldn't call it our standard, just didn't fit into our right, deal for us. We had a partner of ours or a competitor, and we called them and said, this is the right deal for you. And we've done some of those deals where we've handed it off and they've done it, and they, in most cases, they did them really successfully.
Wow, so this is very exciting, having the dream team, the Mozart dream team, the birth of the Mozart dream team on the SNF Spotlight. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate the input you gave us, and I wish you guys a ton of success.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for sharing this tremendously important part of senior care. The SNF Spotlight series highlights healthcare heroes and thought leaders in the skilled nursing community. We're building awareness, trust, and shining the light on SNFs. So stay tuned. Remember to like, comment, and share.